What's going on YouTube? It's TH back again with another video, and today we're actually doing our first reaction video of the draft cycle, and we're going to react to Mel Kiper Jr.'s latest big board ranking. Put this out on Thursday. I'm recording it on Friday. You're watching it Saturday, or hey, maybe even further into the future. But I'm excited to continue our draft coverage, which kind of leads me into two questions I want to ask off the top. One, do you guys still want me to do the power rankings, weekly, predictions going into the NFL slate, or is it about time for me to kind of turn my attention to the NFL draft cycle? And is that really the content you're looking for out of me? And then on that note, next week or maybe in 2 weeks, I'm thinking about doing a live streamed mock draft. It'd probably just be one round, but would you be into that? Would you dig that? Would you want to join that? I think it'd be a fun way to try to get new viewers to the channel and kind of join our community. I think we have a really fun conversations every time we have mock drafts, and people in my comment section, I really enjoy talking ball with all y'all. So I feel like that'd be a fun way to kind of add to our community and find some new eyes, but also kind of have some great interaction with y'all live, and then also let y'all make some picks. So I think it'd be a fun time, but let me know what you think. I'll make sure that's the pinned comment. Also, I'll probably make a poll in the community tab, so subscribe, so that way you can vote in that poll as well. But with all that down, let's go ahead and start talking about Mel Kiper Jr.'s latest big board. It starts off with Jalen Carter, and I don't think this is any sort of surprise. And then, Will Anderson Jr. there right behind him. So, no complaints here, 1 and 2, and I'm gonna give a final grade here. 10-point grading scale can be something that I do in these reaction videos. And right now he's batting 100. He's batting 1,000, I should say. Former baseball player, I should have that down. But I had Bryce Young as my #1 overall player. But if you're not taking into account position value, I totally get it. Carter, Anderson are probably legitimately the two best and most NFL-ready guys in this draft class. I had Jalen Carter ranked ahead of Will Anderson in my big board. Definitely go back and check that out if you missed it. But I don't think you can go wrong either way. And, Will Anderson Jr. was just named SEC Defensive Player of the Year. So, dude still has a ton of clout. He had 17.5 sacks a season back, and now he gets so much attention throughout this season for Alabama. So, it kind of makes sense for why his numbers maybe took a step back, but he's still a freak athlete. He still plays, bigger than his actual size. And then Jalen Carter, #1 player, and I can't disagree. He's been a true disruptor there in the middle of the Georgia defense. He's great against the run. Awesome pass rusher as well. And in big games, I think back to that Tennessee game and that safety/touchdown he forced in the first half. That's the type of games where you feel Jalen Carter the most. So no complaints with those two going 1 and 2. Then Will Levis at 3. So up until this point, pretty sure Kiper had I think it was Stroud at QB1, and then it was Levis and Young. So wow, this is a bit of a shakeup here, and Levis moves up a spot. Even he was previously 4, now he's 3, and this is going to be what you see a whole lot of. Especially when you look at it from a traits perspective. I still have Bryce Young again as the #1 overall player in this class, accounting for QB position value. To me, he's just got the intangibles, and the size doesn't really scare me all that much. I just feel confident about Bryce Young leading an offense, and I think he can make just about every throw. He's got enough arm strength. He's got good touch, enough maneuverability. With Will Levis, it's a howitzer for an arm, good mobility, solid frame, willing to take a hit. I just don't think that Kentucky offense really kind of put him in a spot to really showcase all that. And this is nothing against Mark Stoops. He's done a great job. He keeps getting extensions at Kentucky for a good reason. He's doing a really good job, and kind of turned that program into, or turned that school really into a football and basketball school when, I never really thought I'd be able to say that. I thought that was a basketball school and that was it. So a ton of credit there. But, Mark Stoops, just like his dad, defensive-minded coach. They want to pound the rock and win with their defense. So I never really felt like Will Levis got the chance to open it up. And, even in my last mock draft, I had Will Levis going 5 to the Panthers. And I had some Panther fans commenting saying, haven't we gone through enough? So there's going to be detractors against Levis, but then there's going to be people like Kiper here who have him at QB1, and I fall in love with these traitsy quarterbacks, so I wouldn't doubt it. Right now, I have him at QB3, but he certainly can make that leap over Stroud. But here as the #3 overall prospect, QB1 for Mel Kiper, I'm actually kind of surprised he's made this type of a leap forward with Levis this kind of early in the cycle. Maybe if we got to back half of January into February, I could see it or past the combine. Man, this is kind of early, but man, credit to Mel Kiper Jr. And then he's got Bryce Young. So maybe his initial rankings were Young, Levis, Stroud. I think maybe it was McShay who had Stroud, Levis, Young, but they both had Levis there at 2. But like I just said about Bryce Young, I think he's the best player in this class when you account for position value, but I think he's also the best quarterback. There's just so much intangibles there. Yeah, a little small, but again, I think the arm strength's there. I think he's got phenomenal accuracy at pretty much all 3 levels. Enough maneuverability, specifically in the pocket. He does a great job extending plays. And, I think he's done a lot with an Alabama team that is maybe at a little bit lower of a talent pool than in years past. So we've gotten to see Bryce Young do it in, a system like last year where he had a first-round wide receiver in Jamison Williams, another guy who got drafted on day 2, offensive linemen who are now playing the NFL, Will Anderson having this sensational season on the defensive side. That was like the Alabama team we're kind of accustomed to seeing when it comes to a talent perspective, and he wins the Heisman. And now this year, where that talent has kind of taken a step back, he's kind of kept Alabama in a ton of games. The only reason that Tennessee game, in my opinion, was close because Bryce Young was going blow for blow with Hendon Hooker, which it says a lot in Tennessee, might I add. And, Alabama's kind of lingered in this college football playoff, conversation. They're ultimately not in the college football playoff, but Bryce Young's a huge reason why they were even in the mix, in my opinion. And then he's got Jackson Smith and Jigba at 5. And, this is going to dock the grade. I'm here for the first 4. I can get behind that, but I'm sorry. I just, I don't want to go too cold too quick on JSN, but I think he's going to run in the mid 4.5s, maybe even slower than that. He does have solid size at 6'1", 200, so it kind of depends on the offense, right, and what you're asking of him. I think if you put him in a scheme, let's say he goes to the Ravens at 21 or wherever they're picking right now in a mock draft. I think him as a slot type that can work the middle of the field, find those soft spots in the zone. I think that kind of makes sense. And even with his size and stature, Juju Smith-Schuster-esque. Now, I even think Juju ran in the 4.4s. I had to double check his combine results, but I don't even think JSN has that type of, get off. So, I'm worried about the athletic profile, but from a size perspective and a football IQ perspective, the dude had 300 plus yards in the Rose Bowl for a reason last year. So, and, he's garnering the respect of a Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, who both said Jackson Smith and Jigba was the best wide receiver in that core. That was obviously from last year's Ohio State team, but, I didn't have him in my top 32. So this tells a huge difference here between me and Mel Kiper Jr. So I like Jackson Smith and Jigba, but I'm kind of thinking top of the second round's that sweet spot for him. Honestly, if the Jags didn't have Christian Kirk as, that slot heavy type of dude, I'd love to see JSN, top of the second round to a team like Jacksonville that, can still use some offensive firepower. Then he's got Peter Skoronski here at 6. No complaints there. Personally, I have Paris Johnson Jr. as my OT1, but, Peter Skoronski's just been able to manage, right? 6'4", a little small when it comes from a weight perspective. And I am interested to see the arm length. I've heard rumbling from, plenty of other people, but Dane Brugler actually even talked about it. 32.25-inch arms. That could be an issue, but also Rashawn Slater didn't have the world's longest arms, but I still think he was at that 33-inch threshold. But nonetheless, you watch the tape and you just watch Northwestern play, and there's nothing disrupting their quarterback from the left side. And Peter Skoronski has just been phenomenal as that Rashawn Slater replacement for the last 2 years. He continues to be a great player. So the frame may be a little bit concerning, but when you look at the tape, you look at the production, I totally understand why he could be someone's OT1. I just prefer the higher upside with maybe someone like a Paris Johnson Jr., and if he was still in this draft class, Olu Fashanu, something like that. Then we get Stroud here at 7, and I still think all 3 of these quarterbacks should be in the top 10 of most people's big boards. Stroud's going to be an interesting case study, right? Ideal size, and when playing in structure, if you were to just take solely what he does in structure, he could be classified as the best quarterback in this class. And I really wouldn't argue with you, because dude could make just about any throw, has a huge arm, and the timing perspective and the decision-making perspective, when all is going right, the ball's coming out on time, he's making the right read, it's hard to slow down CJ Stroud. It's just when the play breaks down, right? That's where trepidation can kind of settle in. So it'll be interesting to see once he gets to the NFL level, especially considering we live in a time where the Pat Mahomes, sidearm toss, and Josh Allen on Thanksgiving getting to the sideline and kind of this jump pass, cross his body into the end zone for a touchdown. Like, that ability to create when a play breaks down is something teams are looking for in a quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how much that dings CJ Stroud and his stock. But nonetheless, if he gets into a system that, keeps him clean and puts him in a great spot to succeed, I can see this dude having a ton of success at the NFL level. So it's a true give and take situation, because when it's good, CJ Stroud is going to be fine. He's going to be a really good NFL quarterback. But if he gets into a situation where the offensive line's not great, where wide receivers aren't getting open, like if you were to put him in Chicago's situation, if you were to put him in Justin Fields' shoes, I'd be concerned. Now, granted, the Bears have made strides in the right direction. I'm not trying to take away from that, but that type of spot could be a little bit concerning if Stroud finds himself in a situation like that. But still like the talent. Still like the talent for sure. Then we get to 8, Bijan Robinson. I can't complain with this. The tough part is with my mock, I had him at 11, or excuse me, my big board, I had him at 11. Part of that is position value, but I will say when it comes to talking about a running back, he is more than just a true halfback, right? Like, he's the best pure runner in this class. He can run inside, outside, power scheme zones, I think he'd be fine in any. He's going to put up some great numbers at the combine too, and just a freak athlete. Phenomenal pass catcher. You can split him out wide. You can play him in the slot. You've been around this channel. You've heard me say this 1,000 times. So he really is the exception to the rule when it comes to thinking about a running back in the first round, where I'm not normally somebody who's keen on that. Depending where we're at in the first round, and do you have 2 first-round picks? There's a number of teams that have multiple firsts, so it's like, that second pick, I could excuse a little bit of a lower position value type of play, like a Bijan Robinson and halfback. So it kind of depends on the situation, but man, if this guy, this to me, he's the best running back prospect since Saquon, and Saquon was the best running back prospect since Adrian Peterson. So I think that speaks volumes about what he could do. And Bijan, unlike those other 2 guys, Saquon can catch out of the backfield for sure, but Bijan really fits with what the NFL wants nowadays, given his pass catching ability. So no complaints with him at the top 10, or specifically the top 8. Quentin Johnston, I think he'd be my wide receiver 1 based off of traits, and he was my wide receiver 1 on that big board. But there's not much separating him and Jordan Addison. Just love the size, speed profile, great yak ability, also pretty solid body control and the ability to go catch the ball at the high point. So I think he's one of those guys that will win in, the short game perspective, being a yak weapon, but also being a great downfield weapon. So if you win in 2/3 of the field as a wide receiver, that's good enough for me to validate being a first round pick versus, these specialist guys that are really just kind of the underneath, techs and the end around guys and those gadget gimmick, type of players, like an Anthony Schwartz. Like, that's not a guy you want in the first round, right? And there's a reason he went day 3, right? Quentin Johnston, you can win in big ways, really, at 2/3 of those levels, right? Shallow underneath stuff, but also as a deep route runner. I think he does those really, really well. So no complaints with him at 9. Myles Murphy there at 10. I'm actually a little surprised he's this low. But granted, when you have 3 quarterbacks in the top 10, that will push down some good talent. It's kind of what we had with the 2021 NFL draft, right? With Jamar Chase going 5 and Penei Sewell going 6. If you take away the quarterbacks, teams would love to have those 2 guys in that top 3 conversation. But Murphy's going to put up some insane numbers at the combine. So this is a guy who I think stock is still on the rise here. So he's even moved up a spot here from Mel Kiper Jr. with 6'5", 275, all athlete. I think he's one of those guys where the production is going to take a sizable step forward at the NFL level, where, for a majority of the beginning of his career, in that Brent Venables defense, it's a lot of 3-man defensive fronts. So he's catching a ton of double teams. And even this year, it hasn't been as flashy as I was hoping, but this is one of those guys where, given, again, the frame and the athletic ability, put him in, Philadelphia, a team that continues to put emphasis on the defensive line and develop those guys at a high level. This dude could easily become a double-digit sack a year type of guy. But even just getting the NFL, like if he goes to Seattle, Atlanta, one of these teams in the top 10, I think he'll make a pretty big impact right away. Then we get to Tyree Wilson, who's, right around the same weight, but much bigger and way longer arms. I don't want to say way longer, but longer arms. It just wins a different way. I think Myles Murphy will win by being a speed rusher, winning with finesse. Tyree Wilson's going to win with power and long arming people and bull rushing people. So they're different edge rushers. And, Tyree Wilson's kind of an interesting case. I've always thought of him as a 3-4 stand-up outside linebacker with the ability maybe to drop inside to play that 3-tech. But I've seen some people classify him as a 4-3 DN. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what the NFL, once we get to the combine and, interviews are happening and we start to get a little bit more buzz and a little bit more word out of, NFL teams and their front offices. How do they view Tyree Wilson? I always kind of thought of him as a 3-4 guy, but there's plenty of other people who think he's a 4-3 fit. So it'll be interesting to see what type of defense, he will ideally kind of, fit into. But that being said, I say this all the time, nickel is becoming more and more the base of the NFL level. So he's going to have to learn how to play with his hand in the dirt or stand up and, play that, 7-tech or, wide 9 maybe even. So really like the potential that's there, just given, insane pterodactyl type of arms. Does need to add a few more moves, but kind of hit his stride this year, Texas Tech, prior to the injury. But really excited to see what an NFL team could do with him. Kind of like that Myles Murphy. What type of potential could they unlock? Brian Brzee here at 12, another phenomenal athlete at Clemson, right? And especially that interior defensive line position, when you get those types of freaks, like look at the impact that Jeffrey Simmons has made, and a Dexter Lawrence this year for the Giants, or Sexy Dexy as I should call him. When you get a difference maker at that position, it feels like, while it may not be the most valuable position, it feels like it just has this huge multiplier effect on the rest of the defense, because once you take away the ability for a quarterback to step up in the pocket and avoid, the edge, take the Giants, for example, with Dexter Lawrence, being able to take away that step up, escapability, or escape plan for a quarterback, Kayvon Thibodeau gets that much more production because of it. So I love the idea, for a team like Philadelphia, who's going to have some older guys there in the interior eventually moving on, or a Seattle and Atlanta pairing them up with Grady Jarrett. That could all be really fascinating. So I can't wait to see where Brian Brzee ends up. But he's also one of those guys where, hey, Jalen Carter's the number one player in this big board here from Mel Kiper. I think after the combine, Brian Brzee is going to shrink that difference from 11 spots here, and it's going to become a lot more narrow. And once we get further on in the process, Michael Mayer, to me, the best tight end in the class, doesn't have to win with athletic ability because, he doesn't really have a whole lot of it. And I think that speaks to how good of a route runner he is, high-level football IQ, and his ability to be a good route runner helps him against man, and then his football IQ helps him in zone. So even without being a great, athlete, he's, I don't want to say foolproof, but he's close to it, and great hands too. So it just feels like this guy, maybe the Jags, back end of the top 10, could use this guy as a really nice security blanket, especially for a young quarterback. I think that fit would make a ton of sense. Then we get to Paris Johnson Jr. This is my OT1. I just love the upside here. 6'6", 315, as you see on the screen. First year playing left tackle as well, played guard last year. I think that just speaks to how good he is, right? Like, he's almost too big to be a guard, in my opinion, especially at 6'6", but Ohio State was like, hey, I got to get my 5 best offensive linemen on the field. So Paris Johnson Jr., sorry, you're going to have to play guard. So I think that speaks to how good he is when Ohio State, of all programs, is trying to rush him onto the field. So first year playing tackle, I think he's done a great job too. And it's been one of the best teams, in college football. They're in the playoff for a reason, right? So I think he's been phenomenal. You look at his PFF grades, he's been one of the best tackles at the Power 5 level. So love the upside too, and especially once you get more and more playing time, I think this guy's got a really high ceiling. Then we get to Jordan Addison. I don't know if there's 6 spots worth of a difference between Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison. I only had a 2-spot difference between those two. It just really comes down to, do I want a project, potentially hit huge on Quentin Johnston, or do I want to go with a little bit of a safer route, someone who's a little bit smaller at 6 foot 175, and Jordan Addison, who still has great downfield speed, is the best route runner in this class, and has really shored up his hand. So it comes down to give or take. What do you want? Do you want the project and maybe a little bit more of a risk with Quentin Johnston, but potential to hit big? Or do you want the safer play and you want to trust the route running? I tend to fall in love with these route running archetypes. I was huge on Jerry Jeudy. He's my wide receiver 1 that year. And there's plenty of reasons. Jamar Chase was wide receiver 1 for me that year, but Devonta Smith is that route running archetype. Certainly made it a conversation. And Jalen Waddle was in that play too. So all 3 of those guys are really, really good, by the way. So, Jordan Addison, I'm definitely biased to his ability to just create for himself and get open. Now, it doesn't always work out. Jerry Jeudy hasn't really lived up to expectations, but I think Devonta Smith's been a really nice number 2 this year for Philadelphia. So it can be a risky play for sure, because especially the size component. But I think this guy were to end up in Los Angeles with the Chargers or some fit like that, where they need a deep route running archetype type of dude who can get open down the field but use that speed as well. I think there's a really nice landing spot potential here. Middle of the first round right here for Addison. Then we get to Zay Flowers. This is actually as high as I've seen anybody have Zay Flowers, so I'm actually kind of taking it back here. Again, you're hitting my raw reactions to this. But that being said, he's got his fans, right? Like, even ESPN, they did a round table, and maybe it was Kiper who was singing Zay Flowers praises. Maybe it was Jordan Reed, or Matt Miller. It was one of those draft analysts that they have on staff there at ESPN. But I mean, you look at his production at Boston College, it's the first thing they talk about, 300 plus catches and 30 plus touchdowns. That's pretty darn good. That speaks to his ability to be able to get open. And that's a Boston College team where, not a whole lot to glamour or love. And that offense hasn't necessarily been, over the moon or anything like that. But Zay Flowers has been a consistent presence. And, I've always kind of thought of him as a solid day 2 type of pick. But, I could also see where, he's forced 25 missed tackles, a solid combine. He could work himself into that first round conversation. 16 feels a little rich for me, but hey, we all have our guys, right? And then we get to Joey Porter, and this is one of my guys. I love these long, lanky, long-armed corners. This is my type of dude. This is my type of investment, right? So we're, wide receivers, I'm biased to those route running archetypes because I don't have to do a whole lot. I know they'll get open. We can fix the drop problem if that does come to arise, kind of like an Amari Cooper or a Jerry Jeudy his rookie year. But on the other side of the ball, I love these types of corners, right? Where you may be a little raw, but if it works out, you can get a Tariq Woolen type of impact where, Woolen's 6'4", so he's another step forward beyond this. But if Joey Porter Jr. works out at 6'2", 200, his ability to go get wide receivers to the line of scrimmage, I mean, he could legitimately take a guy away if he hits his full potential. So I'm all in on it. And plus, year over year at Penn State, he's just gotten better and better and better, that's obviously the progression curve you want to see. His dad played in the NFL, which will be a fun story. And then, following it up with another corner here and Christian Gonzalez. I mean, this is a guy who's really kind of won me over the more I've watched Oregon. I feel like at the beginning of the year, I didn't realize he was 6'2", 200, but that's his measurables, right? And this is another one of those guys, man press defense, this guy can totally fit into it. Now, granted, we live in a day and the age of the NFL where you're starting to see less man and more zone. So it'll be interesting to see how he potentially kind of converts into being able to do both at the NFL level. But, we could also land in a spot like, in Arizona, right? Playing with Vance Joseph, he's still the DC. I think that would be a really good fit for him. So Gonzalez, Porter, I think I'd lean Porter Jr., but man, with those frames and both their athletic profiles, Christian Gonzalez is potentially going to run in the 4.3s. So, yeah, there's a whole lot to like about both these guys. And this is a quarterback room or a cornerback class, I should say, where, there's some really nice talent to be had. And a lot of these guys, right now, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of top 10 buzz for these names. I still have them right around that, 10 to 11 mark. But, man, there could be some really solid value with this cornerback group this year in the NFL draft. Then we get to Anthony Richardson here at 19. I mean, he declared. I'm honestly a little surprised, but, obviously Anthony Richardson's the ultimate wild card here. He's almost like a Trey Lance this year, where it's like, Lance could go as late as 15 to New England, or he could go as high as 3 to San Francisco that year in 2021. So Richardson could be the same thing, right? It takes one team falling in love with his ability. It takes one coach seeing week 1 against Utah and saying, that's what I can get out of him week in and week out. Or, that throw to start. It was the first play from scrimmage, I think, from the Florida offense against Florida State. And he just delivered a dime as he was getting hit the wide receiver and started. It was like a 56-yard touchdown. It was a thing of beauty. I was freaking out. That's the type of stuff Anthony Richardson can do. Now, he misses throws still. The decision-making is not always great. But when it's good, wow. I mean, your jaw hits the floor. So obviously huge wild card here, but he has the arm, he has the mobility, he has the frame. It just takes, finding that right place that can develop him. So, Giants back end of the first round in that 20s, maybe even late teens, depending on how the year finishes out. I'd love to see what Brian Dable could do with Anthony Richardson. Into the 20s now, Brian Branch. I mean, this guy just feels like he sees the game at a faster level. He's played legitimately all 5 defensive, secondary positions. But now he's found a nice home in that nickel to strong safety position. I'd love to see him kind of just fly around the field, right? Like, he almost has a little bit of Javon Holland in him, where, Oregon used him at free safety, strong safety, and nickel corner. Brian Branch has kind of been strong to nickel for the most part, but he has had some snaps at free. But that being said, his just ability to break on the football and just kind of see the play develop is just different. And a lot of people, when it came to Javon Holland, it was Javon Merrick, and then there's a large gap between him and Holland that year. I was one of those people that was saying, I don't really think there's a huge difference. Merrick earns the right to be safety 1, but Holland is a stud, and he was a player I loved coming into that draft class. And Brian Branch has just gotten better and better. And my appreciation for his game has only grown every time I get to see him play for Alabama. So super speedy. I think he has high-level instincts and just a great break on the football. So, and he's got a nose for the football, too. So, ideal size, too, for that strong safety nickel hybrid. Big fan of Brian Branch. And then we get Deonte Banks. Not a name that you'll see a whole lot of, but hey, I like 6'2", 200-plus pound corner. So, this is definitely a guy, and he was actually not ranked in the last big board for Mel Kiper Jr. So, I'll have to go back to the tape and turn this on more, especially once we get in the offseason and the regular season finishes. Tape becomes that much more accessible, and there's, I can sit down and kind of grind through his entire season instead of going week by week. So, this is definitely a name I'll have to circle back to, but hey, he's got the build of a cornerback that I will fall in love with. Andre Carter the second here, still in the top 25, which is good. I think he's a project worth taking. Yeah, the production has taken a step back, and maybe he's not ranked as high as what we maybe thought he could be. If you go back to our way too early rankings and our preseason thoughts about Andre Carter, but man, at 6'7", 250, and his play strength and his hands, too. He's got violent hands. Kind of the same stuff I said about Karlaftis last year, but this guy's even bigger and even stronger, maybe, which is just bonkers because Karlaftis, that dude's an ox. So, this is a special project right here. Now, there's probably a relatively low floor once he gets to the NFL level because maybe it just doesn't come together. But, man, if the ceiling hits, this dude could be a freak power rusher. So I like him still being in the top 25 despite maybe the production not being there yet. Still some time this year. And he's got, at the time of me recording, he's got the Army-Navy game. He could ball out with everybody watching tomorrow. Then we get Broderick Jones here at 23. I've been really impressed with him this year at Georgia. First-year starter there at left tackle. He, like Mel says here, he could go back to school, but, what little we got to see the season prior to this season. He was good. It just was a small sample size, and I think he's just been able to be that good again this year, but on a bigger sample size, which is obviously very impressive, and doing it for an offense that has been phenomenal. I mean, look at the numbers Stetson Bennett's been able to put up this year. I'm not saying Broderick Jones is hauling in those touchdowns, but he's keeping them clean, right? And then that Georgia run game continues to be really efficient. I think Broderick Jones has been really, really solid. I was actually kind of surprised he wasn't ranked in the initial, big board for Mel Kiper Jr. So also 6'4", 310. There was like a stretch at this point. I don't know if this stat's still true, so don't take this as finite. But through like the first 10, 11, maybe even 12 weeks, he had not allowed a sack and only gave up 4 pressures. That's some pretty damn good stats. Devon Witherspoon, this guy continues to climb up a lot of people's boards. 6'1", 180, so ideal NFL size, maybe a little bit lighter, but I'm not really worried about it. To me, he's just been the best coverage corner, potentially in the Power 5. I mean, he's really impressed. And I'm glad to see him kind of have this meteoric rise up a lot of different people's boards. And that's kind of the fun of the draft cycle. Yeah, we do these way too early rankings. Take it with a grain of salt. But it's really fun when you get these players like a Devon Witherspoon, who wasn't really on my radar. But he gives me reason to watch Illinois football. So thank you, Devon Witherspoon, for that. And then we get Keely Ringo. And now think about this. Let's go back through this. Keely Ringo, still my cornerback 1. But that's how variable I think this cornerback class is going to be for people. Devon Witherspoon ahead of him. Then you have Deonte Banks. You could count Brian Branch as a corner, but let's just call him safety for the sake of the argument. Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter, and I believe there was one more corner in front of those two. Am I wrong? Okay, maybe I'm wrong. But you're still talking about 4 corners. Let me hold up that appropriately. 4 corners ahead of Keely Ringo, so he's CB5 for Mel Kiper Jr. I find that really interesting. We're actually going to go through the position rankings next. So I'm still in on Keely Ringo. Sure, it maybe hasn't been as good as it was last year, but cornerback play is variable, and he played really, really good last year. I still think he's played at a relatively high level this year. And 6'2", 210 pounds, long arms, so running the 4.3. I mean, again, the making of an NFL cornerback and a project I am willing to take the risk on. And if this is a guy who, let's say he does end up being CB5 in the NFL draft, that's a hell of a value if you ask me. So I'm all in on that. And, man, I think every corner that Mel put on here is 6'1" or taller. NFL teams or losing their minds over that. I mean, that's what they're looking for, right? So, wow, this is going to be a fun cornerback class to cover the rest of the draft cycle. Let's go ahead and go through these QB rankings, or position rankings, I should say, and see if there's anything interesting here. Levis, Young, Stroud, Richardson, Jaden Daniels over Hendon Hooker. That's kind of interesting. The dual threat ability for Daniels could certainly be appealing to NFL teams, and having him right behind Anthony Richardson makes sense to me. I'd probably have Hendon Hooker ahead of Daniels. I'm also still a big Tanner McKee believer, so I'd probably have McKee ahead of Daniels as well. Obviously, I'll do my updated QB and running back and all these position rankings, so you'll see it down the line. Running backs, yeah, Bijan. He's got Devin Achane there at 2. That's fascinating. He runs for the track and field team at Texas A&M, and dude has a legit shot to have the fastest 40 time this year's combine. If he does, that's obviously going to boost his stock. I'd still have Jahmyr Gibbs. He was my preseason RB2. I still like him in that spot. And then I'd probably go Sean Tucker at 3. And Sean Tucker's not even in Kiper's top 10. Wow, that is interesting. And Zach Evans isn't either. That's a good call out there in his honorable mentions. Fullbacks, sorry, fullbacks. I'm not going to talk about that. Wide receivers, you still got JSN at 1. I've already kind of hit on that as well. Personally, I'd probably go Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, and then Josh Downs, then maybe JSN. But Cedric Tillman's also an interesting name. And then I'm really glad he had Dontayvion Wicks. This guy, once we get to the combine, look out. Because, sometimes it takes that trip to Indianapolis for, these names to really break onto the scene, right? So, awesome size, awesome athlete. And if he doesn't have any cash issues, right, if he does okay on the jugs machine at Indy, this dude can make a big-time rise and maybe even work himself. I don't think late first-round conversation, but he could certainly work his way into the day 2 mix. Get the tight ends. Tucker Kraft here at 2 from South Dakota State. This is a really good tight end class on the low. Michael Mayer, I think, is still the guy at the top of the class. I'd probably go Kincaid, then Musgrove, and then Laporta, then Kraft. It's just tough when you come from South Dakota State. But that 1 through 5, and then Darnell Washington there at 6. This tight end class, you really can't go wrong with a lot of guys that are in the mix. Offensive tackles, Peter Skoronski could end up being a guard, but for the sake of argument, let's just keep him at a tackle. I'd probably have him at 2 right now. It would have been Olu Fushanu if he, declared, but he just has to go back to Penn State. So Paris Johnson Jr., Peter Skoronski, I'd flip those 2. But then I'm fine with Broderick Jones there being 3. Blake Freeland, I think, has done a phenomenal job this year. Now second-year starter at left tackle. Kind of almost gives me Mike McGlinchey vibes. Now, granted, McGlinchey plays right tackle, but that size and that frame is very similar. Matthew Bergeron has been a name that he's actually graded pretty well at Syracuse, and a name I'm starting to see a whole lot more of as the process continues. And then Jalen Duncan's an interesting name. He feels like one of those guys where you either really like him or you really don't. I'm excited to go back into his tape because he was in my honorable mentions for offensive tackle coming into the season. I wanted to see if he lived up to my expectations. And then Anton Harrison at 9 to me is way too low, especially with Olu Fashanu not being in this year's draft. If Harrison goes late 1 to a team like a Kansas City or a Buffalo trying to add more tackle depth, I'd have no qualms with it. I'd be fine with it, but especially top of the second round, I think that's where he belongs. And then DeJuan Jones has been phenomenal this year at right tackle for Ohio State. And then also Darnell Wright. That's a dude who, he's got to be in this top 10 if you ask me. Obviously, just my opinion. This is all subjective. So, Darnell Wright's been really, really good this year for Tennessee. After moving from left tackle to play right tackle, he's just been phenomenal. So, I think he should be in that top 10 mix. You get to interior offensive line, starting with the guards, I guess. Osiris Torrance, I'm glad to see he's kind of a consensus guard 1. I think Connor Beebe should be a lot higher. Layden Robinson has interesting upside. No Andrew Voorhees. Interesting. I think he's played really well at USC. Beebe and Voorhees. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's played a fair amount of left tackle, but I know Beebe's been able to make that move inside to play left guard. But I think both of those guys profile really well at left guard, and they've been really good this year in college football when you look at their grades and just watch those teams play. Right? USC's got one of the best offenses in the country. K-State won the Big 12 for a reason, right? So I think those offensive linemen play a big reason why. Layden Robinson just gives me so much Roger Saffold vibes, where this dude is just mean in the run game, needs to take a step forward as a pass protector. It's good to see Voorhees here in the honorable mentions. Also, Jordan McFadden, that's kind of an interesting name to include there from Clemson. Centers, I'd have to agree. Probably John Michael Schmitz is my center 1. But I'd follow it up with Luke Wimpler here, who's just been grading fantastic from Ohio State. Ideal size, right at 300 pounds. So like him there. Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas, I think, is also in that mix for potentially being the top center. Now let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. Try not to make this video too long, so I do apologize there. But Myles Murphy as the number 1 end. I guess he's saying specifically as a defensive end. I can get behind that. Tyree Wilson, that's fine. Jared Verse was actually somebody who wasn't in this, but big fan of Jared Verse, the transfer from Albany. I think he's been really good this year. Keon White, also another transfer that's made a big impact there, this time for Georgia Tech. Zach Harrison, I think after the Combine's a name that's going to make rise up boards, because it'll be interesting to see what his 3-cone is, because otherwise, this guy's going to probably run in the 4.4s, maybe the low 4.4s, but still 4.4s at 6'5", 270 pounds, and playing for Ohio State. And he's had games where he's took over, right? So depending on what his 3-cone is, has he been able to gain the ability to turn and be able to gain some bend, get that hip flexion in there? If he has, and he has okay numbers there, I think he's a day 2 pick. And Felix Ndike was down at 10. I'm kind of surprised by that. But you maybe, I don't know. Is he an edge? Because he's kind of small to be a defensive end, if you ask me. But anyways, defensive tackles, Carter Brzee, I think that gap shrinks. I'm a big Siaki Ika guy. I think he belongs in the first round. Tui Tuipulotu, I think is one of those guys who could play edge and then maybe, shrink inside to play interior defensive line. Mozzie Smith was Bruce Feldman's, number 1 on the Bruce Feldman's preseason freaks list. So yeah, that dude's going to get drafted off of that pretty much alone. Keandre Coburn, I think, has been really good this year. No, Gervon Dexter was interesting. He's not been as great as potentially his body and the potential says he can be. So he's already declared, so he is going to go into the draft, but he's a project that could potentially hit big for people. Kalijah Cansey, but I'm almost surprised. My guy, the transfer from the University of Richmond. Hold on, I got to look this one up. Okay, got it. Kobe Turner. I can't believe I forgot his name. If you didn't know, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, actually. So, but he was great at U of R, and then this year, even against Clemson, he plays for Wake Forest now, by the way. Had 10 pressures against Clemson. He's been great this year against the run and against the pass. It actually has a little bit more size than Cansey, so I'm surprised he's not on this list. He's somebody I'm a little bit higher on. He's definitely one of my guys. Inside linebackers. How about this? Drew Sanders at number 1. Hey, look. 5-star recruit coming out of high school, transfer from Alabama to go to Arkansas, and you watch the Ole Miss game, specifically that interception, that dude is a freak athlete, belongs in the NFL draft for sure. I'd still have Trenton Simpson at 1, then Sanders at 2, but obviously I'll give you my updated interior or inside linebacker rankings. Owen Papo here at 8, I think is a good inclusion, and then DeMarvin Overshown, he's another one of my guys. I have him a whole lot higher than 10, but that's just me, obviously. Outside linebackers, you get Will Anderson here. That's just, because Felix Ndike Ozama is only 6'2", and I'm not entirely sure how his run stopping ability is going to translate at the next level. So kind of similar to a BJ Ojulari here. I'd probably throw him in this group versus defensive end. Hey, you know, it's subjective. Mike Morris from Michigan is a name that's getting hot right now. Stock that's certainly on the rise. Nolan Smith, wish he didn't get hurt because we could have seen him in, college football playoff. How does he perform in big games? Isaiah Foskey just declared. I think he's a really good hand in the dirt, 4-3 defensive end option. BJ Ojulari, Derek Hall, both these guys who win with finesse. And then Will McDonald Jr., kind of the same thing at Iowa State. And actually, you look at Hall and McDonald's, bodies, there's only about 6 pounds difference. Those two guys are very, very similar in my mind. Byron Young from Tennessee, another good player that I know a lot of people are fans of. And then we get to cornerbacks. Yeah, and he's got Joey Porter Jr. at 1. I mean, I can get behind that. I also know some people have Christian Gonzalez at CB1. I still got Keely Ringo there. And then not mentioned in the, big board here, Clark Phillips III, Cam Smith. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those two. Also, Emmanuel Forbes played really well. Mississippi State at 6'1", 180. So he's got that Devon Witherspoon type of size, NFL ready. And Jalen Jones, another interesting name from Texas A&M, freak athlete, 6'2". Again, those are my type of guys. Tyreek Stevenson's played well at Miami this year. DJ Turner's played really well at Michigan. He was one of my honorable mentions for the cornerback room. Not a name you're hearing talked about a whole lot, but I still like him, and I'm still a believer in Garrett Williams and his ability. But that is going to do it. Oh, not yet. Safeties. Brian Branch, Antonio Johnson, I would agree there. I'm a big Chris Smith guy. I'd probably have Jordan Battle here at 3, then Chris Smith. But also Jamie Robinson, I think, has been a really, really good player. Transferred to Florida State. Florida State's done a great job grabbing these transfer players, and I think Jamie Robinson is definitely one of those examples. And then J.L. Skinner and Brandon Joseph, both on the honorable mentions. Jalen Catalon I get just because of the injury history. We'll see if he declares, goes back. That decision's maybe already been made. I haven't seen it yet. But Skinner, I think, makes for a really nice box safety, potentially even linebacker convert once we get to the NFL level. And then Brandon Joseph, man, that guy is a true free safety. He's cleaned up the missed tackles this year. I think there's some potential there. But then I believe next is special teams. Sorry, special teams will not be included in this one. But everyone, that is going to do it for my reaction to the Mel Kiper latest big board. There's definitely some things I disagree with. The JSN at 5, that's the one thing that immediately stands out. I have Ringo at cornerback 1, plus plenty of other things you heard me mention in this video. So I'll give Mel, let's go an 83. That's like a solid, good enough B, right? Maybe B minus, depending on, how intricate you want to get with the 10-point grading scale. But let me hear your thoughts. What would you grade this big board for Mel Kiper? Who do you think he has too high? Who do you think he has too low? What do you think of my analysis? I'd love to have your thoughts. And also be sure to let me know if you're interested in a live stream mock draft the next week or two. Love to have your feedback there as well. But hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new around here, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and continue as always to leave me your thoughts down below in the comment section. That's gonna do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, my name is Teach, and I'm signing off.